U.S. History B, Virtual Interactive Notebook 5. Nixon to Clinton. Day 3, Carter. The essential question today, why is Carter widely considered to have been an unpopular president? Okay, to do this topic justice, we really have to do some writing, at least in my opinion, because the Carter presidency, a lot of things happened, and he is widely considered by historians to have been less than successful. But he did some things that were absolutely brilliant, and he is very often referred to as our best ex-president. So, okay, I want you to set your notes up like I've shown you. Put Carter at the top, and then draw a sort of upside-down T-chart. Upper left, popular decisions. Upper right, unpopular decisions. And then below that, not his fault. Below that, I have listed things that Carter decided. And some of them he decided after the administration, but just for simplicity's sake, we're going to just group it all together. And I'm going to go through these things, tell you what he did, and say whether or not they were popular or whether or not historians consider these things to have been beyond his control. The first thing, Middle East peace. So you would write Middle East peace under popular decisions. What he did was he brought peace between Egypt and Israel. Egypt was Israel's biggest opponent. Israel is the new Jewish nation that was formed in 1948, largely by driving out the Palestinian people who were there. This was after World War II, and that's a very controversial thing and remains so to this day. And Israel fought several wars with the neighbors around it. But during Carter's administration, peace was brought between Egypt and Israel, and it has lasted. So he is the first and only president to actually bring peace to the Middle East. A lot of people call Carter the great peacemaker. So Middle East peace, put that under popular decisions. Bad economy. After World War II, the world's factories were destroyed except the Soviet Union's and the United States' factories. And we had 2 decades of uninterrupted prosperity, basically, the 1950s and the 1960s. By the 1970s, our former enemies were online and they were making stuff that was cheaper than American goods and services, and in a lot of cases better, particularly in the automotive industry. You had German cars and Japanese cars flooding the American market, and they were cheaper and some would argue better, particularly Toyota and Volkswagen, right? So the VW Beetle and the Toyota Corolla. So our economy wasn't as good in the 1970s as it had been, and that's probably not Carter's fault. Also, the oil crisis. Was it his fault? The oil crisis. The Association of Oil Producing States, which were mostly Arab states that produced oil that America bought. I mean, America ran on Arab oil during the 1970s. And because of a hostage crisis in Iran, and then because of our support of Israel, OPEC cut off oil to the United States twice. And I was alive during the second one, and I remember it. We lived in West Salem, and to get to a gas station, you had to wait in line for hours. There was a line running all the way up Glen Creek Hill. And they ration gasoline. It's like if the last number of your license plate was even, you could buy gas 3 days of the week. And if it was odd, the other 3 days, people were stealing license plates so that they could have a set of even and a set of odd numbers. People were stealing gasoline out of each other's cars by siphoning it out. So the oil crisis, probably not his fault. Push nuclear power. President Carter had been in the Navy and he was a nuclear engineer, and he thought nuclear power would be a great way to produce cheap energy for the United States. And then a nuclear power plant called 3 Mile Island melted down. That was not popular. So push nuclear power, unpopular decisions. Pardoned the draft dodgers. Something like 50 to 100, I think it's 100,000 Americans, instead of submitting to the draft for Vietnam, went to Canada, and he pardoned them. They could come back home. But draft dodgers who stayed in the country and were arrested and went to prison were not pardoned. And that was not a popular decision. But it was popular among the draft dodgers and the anti-war movement, or the people who had been in the anti-war movement. So, Habitat for Humanity. After he was president, he set up an organization that builds houses for people who can't afford them. And the people who can't afford them actually build their own house, and then they build other people's houses. And it's a beautiful program that's massively popular. And that probably is one of the big reasons why he's considered our best ex-president. He is a peacemaker. He is an evangelical Christian who very much believes in the creed that he has adopted. So there you go. He gave back the Panama Canal. Theodore Roosevelt stole Panama from Colombia. President Carter gave it back. Now, in my opinion, those the right thing to do, but it was not popular. So gave back the Panama Canal, unpopular decisions. He told us we were too materialistic. We didn't like that. This is his famous crisis of confidence speech. If you want to see it, look up crisis of confidence speech. He tells us that we're not going to be happy by buying things. We're going to be happy by loving each other. And we did not like that. And then we elected Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan was very much into us buying things. All right. He didn't kill anybody. That was popular. The United States killed 0 people in wars during his presidency. That's a rare thing. Usually we kill people in wars, but for 4 years we didn't, as far as anyone can tell. The Iran hostage crisis. There was a religious revolution in Iran. The Ayatollah Khomeini and a student movement overthrew the king or Shah that we supported through the CIA. And there was a lot of shady stuff there. They overthrew that guy and they installed an Islamic government and they took Americans hostage. And Carter tried to get them out, but couldn't. Now, he did try to liberate them through the military. So that thing about not killing anybody, he would have if he could have. But there was an incident called Operation Eagle Claw where we sent helicopters with commandos in to take those hostages out of Iran. And the helicopters crashed in the desert and the people who were on the helicopters died. So that was not popular. That's the Iran hostage crisis. Ronald Reagan, the hostages were released the day Ronald Reagan was elected. All right, the 1980 Olympic boycott, not popular. So in 1979, Russia invaded Afghanistan, and to protest that, Carter decided that we would not take part in the 1980 Olympics. And most Americans said the best way to have handled that would have been to go to the Olympics and beat the Russians in the Olympic Games. So this was extremely unpopular. There was an athlete at the University of Oregon named Steve Prefontaine who was probably going to win a number of events at the 1980 Olympics. He's an Oregon hero, and he didn't get to go. And then he died in a car accident that probably involved drunk driving, but that's controversial. And I've included that video below. He's an Oregon hero, and if you want to know about Steve Prefontaine, look that up. Everybody who, well, not everybody, but most of the people who knew him really liked the guy. He was very driven, but he didn't seem to be arrogant with people. He was really good to be around, and wasn't a big guy, and got to where he was athletically through just sheer determination. Finally, SALT II. This was popular. This is the Strategic Arms Limitation Treaty 2. He agreed with the Soviet Union not to make so many nuclear weapons. Now, he signed it, but Congress didn't pass it because in 1980, the Soviets invaded Afghanistan, and Congress decided, well, we're not going to limit our nuclear arms if they're invading Afghanistan. They also didn't like Carter, and they didn't want to give him a win. But we did abide by it. We actually, even though we didn't pass the treaty through Congress, we did abide by the treaty. So he did limit the number of nuclear arms in the world. Carter is remembered as a peacemaker. He presided over a bad economy. He pushed nuclear power, and that was not popular. But he was trying to get us off of imported oil. You know, that's something. And he had a tendency not to shoot people as president. So that was, I mean, yeah, there you go. Okay, so that was Carter. Now for your output, if you could replace Donald Trump with Jimmy Carter, who is alive and only served one term, he's in his 90s, but he's still with it, would you do it? Now, I'm not implying that we should do that. I just think it's an interesting question. Do you think Carter would make a better president than President Trump? Carter was a deeply unpopular president. Trump, his popularity is increasing, but he has been one of our most unpopular presidents if you look at the polls. It's an interesting question. I'm not trying to push an agenda. Okay, so answer that, and I think it'll help stick the information in your head. Appreciate you sticking with me through this one. This was kind of a big one, and I will see you tomorrow for day 4, Reagan.